We have a term that we use internally called first and best, that we want to be the first and best general news application out there on any platform. And our API drives all of that. In 1982, we were the first national newspaper to print 4 pages in color. That sort of cemented our philosophy at USA Today going forward. Fast tracking to 2008, first general news app on the iPhone. That continued on to the Android phone, iPad, Android tablets. This fall, we had a big announcement that we were the first U.S. national newspaper on Flipboard. Had some very positive feedback from that standpoint. HP WebOS, and then Christmas Eve we went live on the Kindle Fire. So you can see it really cements what we try to do here, being the first and the best general news app. Let's go back a couple years. So pre sort of 2008 timeframe. Why would we need an API? Well, we have so many large relationships with a lot of our strategic partners who, what do they want? They want our data. So the Samsungs of the world, we have a lot of travel digital signage deals that we have that we make for our content and news aggregators, among others. But they all want data. They all want different types of data. We've had to figure out how can we get all of our different types of data sets to them. So what do we do, sort of back in the day? We ended up, and I will say it's a nightmare even looking at this slide because it brings me back to this time frame. But we had to create a custom data handler for each one of these parts. And it was just very taxing on my team, very time consuming from that standpoint because they were really sort of one-off. We had some duplication effort that we could use, but really one-off data handlers. There was no documentation. So when you were talking back and forth with a partner, you had to email specific documentation to them. So very time consuming there. And then, which we have done a couple of times over the years, if we have a major change to our CMS backend, each one of those data handlers had to be touched. So you can imagine what a nightmare that was.
What kind of custom handlers are we talking about? Are we talking about file exchanges or?
Yeah, I mean, mainly in the beginning it was usually us FTPing something out to them coming to pick up a file that we had processed and dropped on an FTP location for them to pick up. It required a lot of processing on our side to be able to generate the format that they wanted to. But usually at the beginning it was an FTP of some sort out to their location or them coming to pick up from us. So as I was saying, it wasn't limited to sort of the strategic partners. Also our internal stuff was affected from this standpoint. Both of the phone apps, iPhone and Android phone on initial launch was rolled out without our web service in place. And anybody who's built apps realizes that if you have to worry about how to get the data down to the device or really struggle with how that's going to happen, that's just going to you're not going to be able to succeed in that model. We quickly realized that from that standpoint. So it was a very painful time for us. Also, we didn't have any sort of public visibility to the developers. There was no sort of content that was opened up outside of traditional RSS feeds that we offer. There was no nothing offered for the developers to consume. So we said, okay, this is data handler stuff. We want to get out of this business. So we built this web service, and we thought, hey, this is great. We're good. We can relax now. We're in good shape. But we quickly realized it only got about halfway there. We sort of took the burden off of the development staff to create all these data handlers, but then we created a scenario where we had no reporting, no query limits, no key management. Now we could have built that into our web service, but at the time we didn't. We were concerned about getting the web service out there. So really, we had no knowledge of our API reach. Our web service was developed 2009 timeframe. We realized late 2009, hey, we need some help in this area. So we reached out to Mastery at that point and established a relationship with them, which has been very, very beneficial from our standpoint. So we have our web service, and then you put the API management, Mastery's API management layer on top of our web service, and it creates a very robust environment. So I was talking about we were having reporting struggles before. The reporting aspect of the management layer has been Very helpful both internally. We watch all change notices that go out to all of our different application platforms. We want to make sure that they're not making excessive calls out to our API, which would then lead to possibly bad user experience. And we also track our partners very closely. Some contracts have the API use written into them, and we're able to watch that and add some limits from daily and per second limits in there if we have to. Value tracking, that was an enhancement that Master rolled out, I guess, sort of the beginning of 2011 or early 2011. And we have a lot of data sets that we offer up that are more headline and short briefs with traffic coming back to either USA Today mobile website or USA Today website. And being able to find out what those relationships mean to us and the traffic that we're getting back from those relationships was extremely valuable. So that was a big win for us.
Value tracking is showing you not only how many headlines are shown, but how much traffic and page views that actually drove through your API. Is that right?
Yep, exactly. And we've had a couple developers that have really sort of been driving a decent amount of traffic back to us. We've gone and increased some limits, some query limits from that standpoint to try to encourage them to expand out the use of USA Today inside their application. So, that's sort of the perfect example of what value tracking has given us. It's given us the insight to how much traffic is coming back from the number of API calls that they're sort of generating. Okay, so this is our public portal as it is today, and really what we went to from pre API management layer to post is sort of the reactive versus proactive model. When you have a public portal, it's what I call a proactive model. Users can go there without interaction with you. They can sign up, they can get keys, and they can start developing against your data without any interaction with you. Obviously, if they want some of we'll talk about our public versus private data sets in a little bit, but if they want some of our private features, licensing situations, then they would have to reach out to us from that standpoint. But the ability for somebody to quickly come and work with our data without having to wait for somebody from my team to provision them a key or to get the documentation or anything like that, it speeds up every transaction. So it's been very positive if you look at a proactive situation. So some of the developers you're talking to, they really just want to see the data, or some partners, they want to see exactly what type of data they're going to get back from these calls. So rather than having them say, okay, I have to build a little app to test what type of data I'm going to get back, IODocs speeds that process up. So you're able to, all they need is an API key. They plug the API key in, and they can make GET requests against certain of our API data sets that we make available through IODocs. So what you really want to show them here is what type of data that they're actually going to get back in that response. And I think you might lose some traction if you say to the developer, hey, well, you have to go develop something. Just put it, make your own code, and you can see the response from that standpoint. Now I say just get a key, plug the key, and go to IODocs, and you can quickly see what type of data we're getting back to you.
So this is it's a documentation and testing console all in one.
Yep, correct. So you'll see as you're scrolling down there, you see what type of parameters and options you have available to you. In this particular instance, we're looking at the sports salaries, IODocs, and then after inputting the parameters that you would want in, you can. With the try it button basically is making that call for you, yep. And you'll see the response of your code below that. So all in all, it goes back to it all goes back to how fast you can, whether you're talking with a partner or you're talking with a public developer, how fast you can show them what your data has to offer. So IODocs is another example. So where do we stand today? Let's talk on the internal side of things. So speed to market. I talked about First Invest earlier. Number one iPad news app, number one Kindle Fire news app, first national newspaper on Flipboard. Those could not have been done without a robust API and the management layer that sits on top of that API. So, our developers are siloed to a certain degree between different platforms, Android developers, iOS developers, so on and so forth. The fact that none of those platforms need to worry about how they're going to get the data down to them or what format they're going to get the data in, and that they can concentrate on the design elements and the feature enhancements for a particular device or platform, saves them time and allows us to be able to be first in bet on these platforms. From a strategic partnership, before API rolled out, you'd get on a call with biz dev or sales and whatever partner we're talking to, and you'd go back and forth. Well, how do you want the data? What format do you want the data in? Well, let me email you what you're getting. A lot of back and forth. Days, weeks, sometimes months would go by before you actually get data to them for them to look at. So it really gets to the next stage of that conversation after you can get the data that fast. I will say that probably 99% of our business and sales folks even knew what an API was probably before late 2010 timeframe. Now every one of them knows what an API is, because that's one of the first things that they'll say to these partners is that, hey, we've got this robust API, and we can get you data, and you can slice and dice it however you want. Very, very positive. And then the public developer side. I think that this is a really important audience to reach out to. Not necessarily from a revenue standpoint, but from an engagement standpoint. Developers are very, very good with feedback. So whether it's feedback on enhancements you should be making to your data sets, enhancements you should be making to your documentation, they will give that to you, and they'll be quite frank with you on what they would like to see or what they believe that you're doing right or wrong from that standpoint. So, and this has been a work in progress for us. We have 9 public or open APIs. Currently, these different data sets that we have inside of our API, we have okayed a couple of them for commercial use. We've seen a big lift from there. And then hackathons. We've participated in several, and we have also hosted our own hackathon, which we'll get into in a second.
Eric, I noticed you said 15 private APIs and 9 public APIs. What are the differences between the private and public APIs?
So several of those private APIs are sort of enhancements to the same sort of data set on the public API set. The key way to explain it is we have an articles public API and we have an articles private. Articles public gives you a headline and a URL back to us on the mobile side or on the www side, and on the private side it gives you full text. So we are giving you our full articles for you to use them however you want from that side. In general, it gives you access to our premium type of content.
You've created almost a product line of APIs where very close partners are able to contract for the full text and more data, and kind of more arm's length. Public developers are able to get a lot of great stuff, but not all.
Yeah, we certainly had to protect our licensing agreements. It's an important piece of our revenue model, but we also wanted to make available some of our really unique content and our content in general to the public developer set. So, the public developer set can get Articles API if they're able to use it commercially inside of their application. It's not full text, obviously, but it gives them headlines and some, a short brief in certain situations, and a URL back to our mobile or our www site for the story from that standpoint. So I think it was important to offer both. But we certainly had to watch out for our licensing. Just to steal something from one of my favorite movies, Field of Dreams here. So our initial thought about this, when we finally opened up our API in 2010, our initial thought with these public developers was, hey, if we build it, they're going to come. They're just going to be knocking on the door. We're going to see innovation left and right. And quite honestly, that didn't necessarily happen, right away. We've learned a lot of things from 2010 to where we are now. The biggest thing I think we learned was we had to change the commercial use of in our terms of service. So we opened that up for certain API data sets to give the developers a chance to, when they use our data, to be able to use it in a commercial app setting, which benefited them also. We've been very active in participating in hackathons to get our API awareness after the developer set, and then in December we hosted the MoDev East hackathon. We worked closely with Dalen and Amit from the Mastery developer outreach team. They were a crucial part from our standpoint in in the success of that, of this hackathon. This was the first hackathon that we held in this area, and we had over 100 developers there. 17 hacks came out of that, with 15 of those hacks using at least one of the USA Today API data sets, which was a big win for us. We saw, and just getting and being able to talk to the developers and hearing what the feedback was from them was great for that event. And then really over the last, probably shortly after we rolled out the changes to our terms of use, we started to see the developer registrations pick up. That terms of use broadcast message sort of got picked up by a decent amount of press, and I think the word got out there a little bit that USA Today is really willing to work with more developers. The slide's a bit outdated, but a lot of companies or use the phrase, we want to be where our users are. I don't think that a large amount of those companies truly achieve that. Obviously, I'm biased here at USA Today, but I believe that we've done a pretty good job at trying to be everywhere where our users are. So these are all the platforms that we're on. Obviously, Kindle Fire is in production, was in production at Christmas Eve timeframe for all those that got Kindle Fire during Christmas. And then within days, you'll see our presence on the Windows 8 platform roll out. If you were seeing some of the coverage from earlier today around the Windows 8 platform, you probably heard USA Today mentioned. So not only is it that we're on these platforms and receiving very positive reviews from the audience, from the users of these applications. And that is because it's driven by our robust API. Gannett owns USA Today. Gannett also owns 107 other broadcast and newspaper media companies, with USA Today being the largest. And when we said that, hey, we want to have this public API out there in 2010, there was a lot of hesitancy from the Gannett exec layer. Having a company that is not used to or not comfortable with necessarily opening up their data to public developers, opening up different types of access to their data, we really come full circle since 2010. With the terms of use change speak loudly to what the perception changes inside of Gannett and USA Today. And then secondly, the Gannett has looked at what the USA Today API has done for us, and is now replicating that out to all the Gannett properties, which is in development right now. So Gannett and USA Today will have the same API layer across all properties, which will be just a huge win all around for us.
Well, thanks, Eric. This is it's just really exciting to hear about all the great things happening thanks to the API at USA Today. We're now going to take questions. First one is, Eric, so you mentioned that folks, maybe the high executives at Gannett were a little uneasy about opening up. Do you have any advice for folks who are in companies that are facing similar kind of hesitancy about how you can make a persuasive case for the API?
Well, I think the first thing you could probably do is point at companies like ourselves that do, like ourselves, like The Guardian, New York Times, that have opened up some of their data, opened up some of the walls, and the success that we're having. I talked about how we still regard our revenue stream from licensing model very high around USA Today, and it's something we couldn't sacrifice. And we are still maintaining that. Probably even it's been trending upward very quickly because of the API. People hear about, oh, you have an API, and those relationships start developing very quickly. I don't know if I have a clear cut of list of 10 items to say to the executives that's going to get you to ease their concerns from that standpoint. But I think if you take a look out there, more and more media companies are going this route.
Another question, how do you handle capacity planning and scaling for the API, especially when there's some big news event that may drive a lot of traffic?
Well, since we're on the Mastery API platform, we have sort of the cloud-based caching platform there. So we have the scalability. We also have the caching layer set up so that Mastery is not passing all of those requests back to us from that standpoint. So news obviously is a very tough industry to plan for and scale for every type of news event that occurs. You can get spikes in the evening, you can get spikes in the middle of normal capacity that you're going to be able to handle every news event out there. But Mastery handles that for us because we're on their management platform. They handle all the caching and the cloud-based technology.
If and when Gannett sites go behind a paywall, how will that affect the API? Will there be an API for just the ungated data, or will the API also somehow tie into the paywall?
That's something we probably have 3 or 4 meetings about a week. Our content monetization platform is something that we're going to follow. You're not going to be able to retrieve API data or data through our APIs that you would have to pay for otherwise. So you're going to have different paywalls on the API side of things also. But what we're doing from a licensing standpoint, from a internal use standpoint, is opening up those barriers to that data right now, so that when you go to the Gannett side, and even if there's a content monetization platform in place for that particular paper, they can still receive that API, that data through the API. It would be in a licensing model or an internal use model, though.
Have there been any commercial applications created using the API that were especially innovative that you guys were like, wow, we didn't think of that?
At the hackathon, we had, I mentioned we had 17 hacks were used the use of that API. The winner actually pushed his hack out to the Android store. It's called The Census is Right, so it's playing off of the Price is Right model and using our Census API data set to do that. So I thought that was a pretty creative game that he put together. We have continued to work with developers and try to get that innovation layer out. There's nothing that I necessarily point to that somebody has specifically used our API alone and solely to develop interesting application. We've been included in a lot of unique applications from that standpoint. We've been trying to highlight some of them on a rotating basis on our API portal. If somebody develops an application, even utilizing a part of our data sets, we've been rotating those through on a monthly basis on our API portal.
In the past, you had created data handlers, these legacy feeds for partners. Have you seen these partners been very anxious to switch to the API, or did you have to create some incentive for that? How has that worked?
Working with a partner, or even ourselves on the other side of the fence, working with somebody where you're going to tell them that their current method of retrieving the data is going to be sunsetted after a certain amount of time frame, months or what have you, is always sometimes a tough conversation to have. But I think that with very, very few exceptions, once our partners saw what they could do through the API and how it gave them a lot more flexibility from their standpoint, we really had very few sort of holdouts when switching to it. So, but I mean, yes, it is a very sort of sometimes contentious conversation to have with a partner, or even with us on the other side of consuming data from partners, when you're talking about switching a format of how they retrieve the data from you. But if your API is robust enough, like ours, usually the conversation is a lot easier. And I think that everybody, companies and partners are really understanding the powerful nature of an API in general. So it makes that conversation a lot easier.
Thank you so much, Eric. This has been really fascinating for me, and I'm sure for all the people who are listening in. If you want to explore the USA Today API, it's at developer.usatoday.com. If you want to learn more about Mastery and about all the kinds of things we do for companies' APIs and industries ranging from media like USA Today to retail and data services, travel, online services, you can go to www.mastery.com.